Welcome to the Under 8 Podcast, a daily college basketball show brought to you every weekday in under 8 minutes at the time of recording. It is Monday, December 18th, 8:39 p.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, number 2, UCLA gets a true road win at Ohio State and a pair of AP top 25s to take a look at on this Monday evening. It's all right here on the Under 8 Podcast. Josh, in Columbus this evening, it was a competitive first half. UCLA taking a 6-point lead into the break. And then the Bruins came out swinging in the second half. Thought maybe they're going to run away and handle this. Looked like that for the third quarter and to start the fourth. And then Ohio State comes barreling back, cuts the lead single digits. Ultimately, you get a 77-71 win for number 2 UCLA, and they remain perfect on the season.
Almost had a really good finish here. Ohio State just ran out of time, and the deficit was a little bit too large to overcome. So, got to give credit to the Buckeyes for finding a way to fight back and actually making this at least remotely interesting by the end, because, there was a point there in the third quarter where it did not look like that was going to be the case, and that was with UCLA missing 12 consecutive threes to start the game.
4 of 20 from the three-point line. Overall, they were top 30 in the country coming into this game in three-point shooting, 26th, I believe, heading into the game, their mark being 37.3% from the three-point line as a team. Beating top 25 teams when you go in and shoot the basketball really well is one thing. Now, granted, inside the three-point line, they didn't do a whole lot of missing. Yeah, they were very, very dominant. But going in to Columbus against another top 15 team, shooting as poorly as they did, they got a couple of timely ones late to kind of keep the game at bay. They got one when it was 69-59 to kind of stretch the lead back to 13 and take a little bit more control after Ohio State had gone on a run. But still, the point is the same. When you go into the Buckeyes building, only shoot 4 of 20 and still come out with a win, it's a pretty impressive one for the Bruins.
You got 4 players between 11 and 19 points, so a very balanced scoring attack. Other players chipping in as well. Yeah, it wasn't a one-person show, very well balanced. And the other thing, too, until the final moments, it looked like this was going to be 3 for 3 for UCLA in terms of double-digit wins over top 25 opponents. Of course, Ohio State prevented that from happening. But they're not just playing a difficult schedule. They're not just beating good teams. They are handling good teams in a way that is maybe not quite to South Carolina's level, but not all that far off. This is incredibly, incredibly impressive for what Corey Close has her team doing right now.
Yeah, the question right now is who stacks up with South Carolina? How did they stack up with South Carolina? Don Staley's team, unanimous number 1 team in this week's poll. Again, we'll get to the rest of the women's top 25 here in just a moment, but that's the question, right? Is what are you doing on a nightly basis? What kind of resume are you putting together? But how are you showing the ability to perhaps play with South Carolina when it comes tournament time? Because that's the question that every team in the country is trying to answer, especially those teams sitting right behind them in the AP poll.
Yeah, there was that loss to UCLA to start the season. So from an Ohio State standpoint, pretty consistent other than these 2 games. But as you're talking about trying to reach that top level, Buckeyes have come up a little bit short in their couple opportunities to knock off really, really high level teams. And I just don't know what else UCLA can do to go back to your point. They are through the small portion of their schedule that they've played. They look like a team that might be able to stack up with South Carolina. And that's where we're at right now is, can anybody do that?
We shall see. Top 12 in the women's top 25 maintain serve here on Monday's AP poll. The top 5 looks like this. Go ahead.
Have you ever seen something like that?
I was trying to think back. Probably not. I mean, you'll go weeks where, like, of course, the top 5 stays the same, or
Yeah.
maybe you stretch into 6 or 7, but very rarely do you see it look like a carbon copy that deep into the top 25.
It's wild.
Top 5 looks like this. In case you had forgotten: South Carolina 1, UCLA 2, North Carolina State, that'd be NC State, more commonly referred to as, Iowa and Texas rounding out the top 5. If that's an SEC team, a Pac-12 team, an ACC team, a Big Ten team, and a Big 12 team. So the Power 5 conference is well represented inside the top 25. But Josh, a couple teams getting into the top 25 on the back half of it.
Yeah, your one notable, I guess, move, 11-0 Washington goes from unranked to 23. But obviously that's not a very large jump, and nobody else is really moving. There were some teams that moved one spot up, one spot down, but this is easily the most stable top 25 poll I have ever seen.
Gotta be. I mean, nobody's, like you said, really, there was no jump in either direction bigger than one spot. So it looks very similar for the women's side in terms of the top 25 in week 7 of the AP poll. On the men's side, Josh, we have a new number 1. The Purdue Boilermakers, after their win in Indianapolis over Arizona, they jumped 2 spots over a Kansas team that was number 2 last week. The Jayhawks and Bill Self's team, after getting all that they could handle from IU in Bloomington at Assembly Hall, they stick at number 2. But despite Purdue being the runaway favorite in terms of number 1 place votes, you still had Purdue, Kansas, and Houston receiving first place votes in this week's poll.
I've got no issue with Houston getting first place votes. I mean, the idea of it being a team that was up near the top of the polls to start, that's undefeated, that beat a good Texas A&M team, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Do we really need first place votes for Kansas? I mean, I get it that, okay, it's a loss to Marquette. The resume is pretty good. They also just, nearly lost to IU. But this is just like the last time we talked about when Purdue got this spot back. There's just a right answer here, and it's to put Purdue number 1 because Purdue is the best team in the country. But that's not exactly how the AP poll works. We're to get into that because I have some other things I want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally... I completely agree with you. If Kansas was more convincing, if they walked into Bloomington and steamrolled, if they hadn't lost last week, then sure, then we can have that conversation. But I don't totally see the conversation not putting Purdue at 1. Houston they did get a number 1 place vote last week. So shouts to whoever that is. That is staying pat on Houston being number 1. Absolutely. But Purdue ending up with 48 first place votes. It's not like it was close, but still curious how we get to 6 first place votes for the Jayhawks.
Yeah. Some other notable things: Arizona down to 4 after losing, of course, to Purdue. Baylor down to 10 after whatever happened at Old Caesars Arena. Creighton down to 12 after whatever happened there. But they did beat Alabama, so at least it wasn't a horrible week. Gonzaga down to 15 after losing to UConn. Clemson down to 18 after losing to Memphis, who's now in at 23. Ole Miss, who does not have an impressive resume, who has made games way more stressful than they should be, but is undefeated, 25. Congratulations. Welcome to the AP poll. Kentucky 9, Oklahoma 7. Those were 2 other teams I was looking at. You knew they were going to move up. Question of just how far they were going to move up, and they were both top
10. 2 things. 1, my apologies, misspoke. Kansas did not lose last week. Marquette was a while ago. Number 1. Number 2, it's impressive for Ole Miss to be 10-0 and be lower at KenPom than where they started the season. Lower.
Yeah.
they've gone from 82 to 90th, and they're 10-0. That's impressive. When you look closer, it's not hard to understand why they haven't gone anywhere. When you see a 1-point win over a Detroit Mercy team that's still looking for their first win of the season, they gave Ole Miss all that they could handle. A 3-point win over Sam Houston State, a 1-point win over Temple. You get a Memphis win, that's a good win. But Mount St. Mary's they only beat by 9. UCF they only beat by 2. It's not hard to see why they haven't made a big jump, but 10-0 inside the AP top 25. I don't really have any massive issues with it at this point when they're one of the 4 teams inside the top 100 at KenPom that's still undefeated. At some point, I suppose you should recognize it, but if for no other reason other than it's awkward if you don't recognize it, but still an impressive feat for the Rebels so far this year.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre resume. I mean, if you're going to keep James Madison in there, you got to put Ole Miss in too. James Madison has not been overly impressive outside of that win at Michigan State either. Mm-hmm. So, like we talked about at the end of the last podcast. The other thing I want to talk about real quick here.
Sure.
Michigan State got 10 votes. Or 10 points. That is a 500 basketball team that is about to not be 500 because they're going to beat Oakland tonight. But this is one of those things that we talk about all the time about how important your preseason ranking is. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be. Because what about Michigan State's resume if you take away preseason number 4 says that's a top 25 team? Or, a 32nd or wherever they are this season. That's a team I should vote for the top 25 at 5-5.
Where it's a poll of the most recent result. It just is.
They got right. This is a perfect example of all of the things that factor into the AP poll. They started in a really good spot, so even though they kept losing, they weren't going to completely fall out of the conversation. And then you get the win at the right time, right before the poll comes out, and yeah. I just needed to get that off of my chest.
I'm here for you, buddy. I'm here for you. I'm absolutely here for you. How long did it take them to drop outside of the top 25? I'm going to look. How many weeks did they spend out? So they started at 4. So it took them 4 weeks. So they went 4, 18, 21, and then were out on the 27th, 4th, and 11th. That seems reasonable. But you certainly don't have to look very far to understand how quick a voter might be to try and put them back in based on where they started and the overall the prowess, prestige of the program being from Memphis, Tennessee. We are basically up in arms. The Tiger faithful are basically up in arms about how long it took Memphis to get inside the top 25.
And rightfully so.
And Memphis kind of on the other side of that coin, they kept doing impressive things and then losing like at the wrong time. Like they would do one thing and then lose to Villanova. And so the thing that would be seen was, oh, they just lost to Villanova. Or they lose on a Saturday to Ole Miss and it's, oh, they just lost to Ole Miss. So shouts to the Tigers. Shouts to Penny Hardaway. I am 1 cent. And finally getting Memphis inside the top 25. Anything else you want to touch on there?
That's all I got.
Think that'll do it. That'll do it for this edition of the Under 8 podcast. It is Monday, December 18th, just before 9 p.m. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 pod on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. We will be back tomorrow night. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you